You all know, TED has come up with a number of terms. I'm going to call it the TED cloud and claim that it's limitless. I'm sure there's a lot more to come. So I'm going to be talking about one of these. But every time I turn around, I find a few more, and so I've added some to my favorites. Synonym, I guess that's how you pronounce it, flapdoodle. All right. But see, that's the thing I like about TED is I love the words he comes up with, even though I don't have the slightest idea what he means by them. So, walkie-thinky, tell me about that one sometime. But eternal flaming, Ted, that is just so you. It really, you've done such a great job. So, it's not just throwing the money lenders out of the temple. I mean, we're talking about the fight for civilization here, right? So, of course, flaming is what you got to do. So, here's a quote from Posiplex, which you've probably seen. The embedding of markup is a one-way ticket to hell. All right. So, in my field, I like to see pictures rather than just words. It's a little easier for me to understand just what's being said. And so here we have a one-way ticket to hell, but in computer science we're good at fixing bugs like this where you just add more pointers. Right? But this isn't just your father's hell. It's a big hell. Right? It's bad. Really, it's bad. Right? So, and cut and paste is another one of the things that Ted has remarked on over the years. I have said for some years that whoever chose these words should be hanged, right? And the ... means Ted had more to say about that. So, back to the plot. So we have these words. I'm going to talk about transclusion. Just one of the many ideas that Ted has come up with, but I really feel it's a central idea that deserves more attention. And so that's why I've put it on this slide of the future of transclusion, not because it's a prediction, but more like Alan Kay's saying, I think from '71, that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And so we're all here for the purpose of inventing the future, not predicting it. But links, everyone knows what links are, but few people really understand transclusion, even though they see it quite often in the sense that it's all images, almost all images are transcluded. But it's kind of like electricity, it's in under the floorboard. So just what is it? So I'm just going to give a very oversimplified. So you got some stuff, and that might be in some other stuff. And now you have a new document, and you want to transclude this stuff, but you don't want to copy it. So you have some links of transclusion between your document and the source document. And when you go here, or come to this place here, you're going to get a copy visually. But every time this gets updated, changes to something else, then this one would get updated too when you see it. So that's sort of the basic concept. So images, everybody's familiar with that, so I'm just going to start with one. Pick a random image off the internet. So here's a random image. All right. No, really. Yeah. And so we'll say that this image is here. And so what we really want is just to refer to it. Now, an open question is just what the transclusion refers to, or what a link would refer to. Is it going to be to the embedded context or the image, or maybe even part of the image? So transclusions don't have to be wholes of things, even wholes of parts of things, but even parts of things. And I want to argue that this is a way of adding a lot to the ability to author. So that is the take-home message I'm headed towards. So I'm going to tell you now what it is. That transclusion accelerates authoring. Now note that I'm not saying publishing. I'm thinking that authoring precedes publishing, and that publishing is a subset of authoring. But our problem is not reading. We need better tools for writing so that what people end up reading is a lot better than what they're reading now. So that's where I'm headed. So I'll give you some examples of transclusion and then some concluding remarks. So here's transcluding a diagram. Here's an original diagram I wrote, constructed, and it's got some pieces. Let me delete piece there. And I'm going to transclude that into another place. So here is a transclusion of that, and I can make copies and so on. And all of these are being transcluded from that original. So if I go here and I make changes to it, and I come back, then that change is propagated. Let me make it a little bit easier to see here. Change these things to pink. So it's a way of getting a lot of leverage over what you do when you author instead of having to redo things. So I took the cartoon that you see in your program and I transcluded this in a way I'm going to show you, which I think illustrates this point about how powerful it can be to transclude parts of things. So this is the original file, and if you want to see it, you've got to sort of home in order to be able to see the parts of it and move around and so on. Let me go back down. So that is the actual file. So now what I've done in a kind of movie edit content list way is I've transcluded all of the parts of the comic. Here's another one. Here's another one. And note, I've actually put a comment on this particular one. So I'm just going to sort of movie edit it by going through it quickly. And I can make that go slowly if I wanted to, by just taking a little bit longer. And you get a little bit of sense of what's going on by having more time. But if you're going to do things iteratively, you want to be able to change rapidly the time frame in which you operate, such as editing a movie. So I think I had a comment in one of these, right? The gadfly and the computer business. And so I remember Ted saying something like, Stuart Brand had mentioned, Ted Nelson is the Thomas Paine of computer science. So that was the first time I heard of it, and since we have this new agent from Norway, I thought I would send this question of, is Ted Nelson the Thomas Paine of computer science? So this is what I got back. There we go. I think it's very astute, actually. So thank Norway for that. Oh, and also, there was one of these things, what's a SAG card? I didn't even know what a SAG card was. So I finally had to look it up, and I'm thinking maybe Ted, this is his SAG card, that this never expires. And so now here's taking the same transclusions, where you can see the numbers of them, and that away, in which I've completely reordered them. If I were to play it, you're probably not going to see the difference at all. But this is a way of moving things around when you decide that you want to change the order of things. And that's the thing that's difficult about authoring, is that you have so many ideas, and then you subset them. But even with a subset, there's an astronomical number of ways of ordering them. And so that turns out to be the core of your problem. So in this case, I have the correct order, a random order, and then I also added some of my own thoughts in the middle. So it's a way of sort of adding frames to a movie in which you're actually editing the movie, but you're editing it by adding comments and adding new frames in the movie. So let me just play that real quick. So there's pausing to just show that I plunked in these new thoughts that I want to add if I were the author. or I were someone who was using it to transclude. So I went around, I'm the type of person who likes to know the environment where I go. So in the last day, I made a little bit of a movie for myself to make sure I knew how to get to where I am now, following the route here, going through. Here's the room, different angles where you are in the room to see things, including I wanted to see what the lectern would look like so I would know where the buttons were and so forth. And so here's the same things in a collage, but they're all basically transcluding those same images. Here's another one I did where I walked up 2 stories to the Library of Music, and now here I'm drawing some arrows so you can see where I went. I found the Mikado book in the music section, and that's what the cover looks like, and so here's the contents. And so I actually think that, kind of like Google Maps, it would be nice if we had ways of getting around in our world where hypertext is helping us. So here's another illustration where Ted had this sketch in ACM's, in a 65 publication. Here it is large. Here it is overlaid with me adding links just to make it easier for you to see that the red is the transclusions and blue is just links. And here's some early pictures from Ted showing across windows kinds of links. Very similar to what Vannevar Bush was talking about. No. Nope? No. All right. I stand corrected. So authoring, just being able to do things quickly by transclusions of things that are elsewhere and be able to operate them. This is a transclusion of a note. And just simply authoring quickly and then perhaps even going with copies somewhere else. It just turns out to be a way for you to very rapidly explore your ideas. So here I've got a single image that I transcluded into separate little parts. They're all from that single image. Here I'm scaling them into different sizes. Here I found a tree. Then I'm going to go ahead and put the bulbs on the tree or move them around. And then here to show the transclusion can be recursive. So the things you transclude can be transcluding other things and so on. So this has the same tree at multiple scales with all of those bulbs from that single image of all the bulbs. So again, it's an instance of, I got this thing, I want to use just parts of it. So we'll come back to another one of those. So where does the power come from in this area? Well, these are the areas, the things I would submit. The ability to separate the properties from the things that are being transcluded. So this is a point that Ted made about having an original document stream, and instead of here with these black boxes, which are markup, in this case, say, making the text to be bold. So the text is just raw text, and then the markup makes it, in this case, bold text. And Ted said, well, let's not do that. I mean, this is a one-way ticket to hell, right? So we move the markup into another stream and have pointers into the raw material. And this way, you don't end up making the original stream be sort of corrupted, if you will. So if you want to mark up, what you really want to do is disembed and then use a transclusion of the stream. But you can do the same thing with having colors. This is just a playful of putting a little pixar map. And then so here, these are all transcluding the same one, same image, but I can scale them up or scale them down and change their colors to be whatever we want them to be. So overlays is another thing where you can overlay to get an interface. So the part you see so far is actually part of a bigger screen that I have where I have off on stage right a bunch of things that I can interact with. So it's basically acting as an additional interface for me, even though you're not seeing all of that. And of course, this is a good way of preserving privacy. Say if you wanted to have someone with an anonymous quote just have an overlay, and you wouldn't really know who that person was, right? So here's, I wanted to show that an example of what I mean by parts of parts. Because until you can have transclusions that are easy to do, you're not likely to do something where you're looking at this, you say, well, the Darius design is known to not be self-starting, so it has problems of starting. So one of the things that you'll see done is a Savonius design is taken and put in the middle of the Darius design. Now, what I submit is we should be able to do this anywhere we are, in our emails, because if it takes you longer than what I did to do this, chances are for most things you're just not going to do them. And so it radically changes what you author depending on how easy it is to do things. And transclusion, I submit, makes that process a lot easier. And they can be activated and you move things around. So in this diagram here, I'm basically saying, well, here's some stuff to transclude, which already is transcluding something smaller than it, and that's going to be transcluded into this green box in 3 different variants in which I've changed the color and I've changed the scale, for example. So what are the synergies? I think there are key synergies between transclusion and links. Everybody's pretty familiar with links. But also with hypermedia, spatial hypermedia, where space is actually an object. In web pages, space is sort of an accordion, and it just expands to fill the content available. If it's just a small amount of content, it's small, large amount of content. There isn't any underlying Euclidean space, except for exceptions. And so spatial hypermedia is good for supporting direct manipulation, where it's real easy to drag things around and make copies, and drag and navigate is to go around in the world, with stuff. And so in essence, you don't need a clipboard because you just pick stuff up like what we do in the real world. So I think I had a couple of white holes here. Coming up with another random person. And what would this person be thinking of? Anybody know? She thinks big. So I think she's very organized. So structured thinking, all right? So the point I was making earlier about the power is that what I have found by studying users over years, like I have one user who studied everything he's done for 6 years in hypermedia. And basically what it shows is that almost everything you do involves a lot of motion. And the actual doing of it can be very small, like a single point and click kind of a thing. But when it's only a single point and click, the pointing actually becomes a long period of time in comparison. So transclusion has the ability to significantly reduce movement. That's the message. So transclusion accelerates authoring. So why is this important? Well, you know from Sir Ken's book on Out of Our Minds, which is about learning to be creative, he says the more complex the world becomes, the more creative we need to be to meet its challenges. Well, that's what Doug's been telling us all along, right? Back in 51 years ago, now going on 52, about how a rate of our problems are increasing faster than our solutions, and if anything, it's just been getting worse. And so he argues for collective IQ, where we sort of organize our thoughts together. But I want to submit that collective IQ doesn't work if there isn't much to collect, and that what we really need is a lot more ability of individuals, so that instead of spending, say, a lot of their time, let's just say a spectrum here, and the left side is you by yourself and the right-hand side is you interacting with other people. If this was a slider bar, what I'm saying is we need to move back in the direction of spending more time talking to ourselves, because in the long run, the most important person you talk to is yourself. You're the only one who has the time to do it in terms of everything. So if you look at your attention is limited, and that's going to be spread across every problem from the goals to what action you do and cycling around in some iterative fashion. But what I want to argue here is that it's not a matter of just making version changes to your plan. The problem is that it's a progressive if you're going to explore a design space, there's just an ever-growing number of variants that are interesting for exploring that design space. And if you can't create these externally so you can think about them, then basically you're limiting what it is you can conceive of, and thereby the problems you can solve. So Brewster Kahle made a remark in his talk about building a system for writers to express the complexity of the thought. He said this is what TED set out to do, and he used the phrase, we need a writer's machine. So just to give you some example, in this particular talk, which I started about 2 weeks ago thinking about it, I always do fresh ones, is that there's actually 587 slides, of which I did nearly 5,500 versions of these, of which you're seeing 20 or 30. So Ted had this course during the fall called Cinema of the Mind, and so that's what I'm saying is that we need writer's machines that allow the mind to concoct stories and to do things very quickly. I happened to teach the course for a couple of times, so thanks for that, Ted. And so for those of you who are here at Chapman and other places teaching students, I learned that a great way to wake students up after lunch is the following question, comment. I downloaded one of your Facebook photos. Can I show it? All right. So it was stunning. A reaction was immediate. Right? Here's just one, but all over the room. There's just a whole bunch of them. It woke them up. So here's my ending. Authoring begins with ideas. Ideas begin with words and pictures. So you need to create lots of words, lots of pictures. But if you follow back the trajectory of TED backwards to see where words and pictures began, this is it. Theodore and Jean Holmes. Home, sorry. All right. Future transclusion. Yeah.
What software were you using?
It's a prototype.
We thought so.
It's a prototype future web browser, which the whole point is to make authoring of things as easy as accessing of things, so that you actually spend more time authoring and thinking of good things that you finally get around to telling people because you've done something worth telling people. So. Did I change the mic? To say the answer again?
If you repeat the questions that you hear, then the people
yes.
who are
All right.
remote will hear.
Gotcha. I'm back on track. So Wendy asked what was the software I was using here to show you things, and it's called Expedite. It's basically Expedite. It's a follow-on to KMS, follow-on to Zog. Yeah.
To expand on that, Rob, it's wonderful. It appears to be really around one person writing, where so much what we do now is collaborative writing in a space. How do we take these ideas from a sole author to really collaborative writing and building?
By virtue of the document having many parts, more like structured, if you will, in the different sections, you can have multiple people in the different places editing the same document at the same time, and it's a lot like walking around the hallways. Once in a blue moon you might bump elbows, but for the most part, the number of parts rapidly expands to outnumber the number of people. And so it's very easy to use an optimistic concurrency control. So in KMS, for example, which is the system Tim Berners-Lee talked about in his paper, 89 paper, it's a fully distributed system, so you can have as many users editing at the same time. And if they happen to edit the very same thing, like someone came back and was editing two of us moved some part of it to separate parts, then the system just says, oh, well, you finished first, so you win, and this other person, you just have to make changes with the new version. It just turns out to be very, very infrequent probabilistically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I heard one answer to this question. I had the delightful experience while watching you that I was watching Ivan Sutherland demonstrating ThingLab on modern hardware, and I wondered if you might have, other than the distributed nature of it, which you just responded to, if you had any other comments about the differences, and especially between transclusion and prototyping, the prototyping concept.
Yeah, the transclusion, I think, is a general concept that you can easily push it in any direction you want. And so I wasn't trying to define it as much as to build on what I hear Ted saying. But there's a lot of similar concepts, so like templates and classes. But basically the underlying theme is you want to find ways of reusing what you've previously done, but not to just use it by cloning and repeating it, but building on it, so that what you've constructed is something new. Because unless you're creating something new, well, why do we need you, right? We need a lot of new stuff. Ted.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that since I coined the word transclusion, it's been used thousands of different places in many different ways.
Yep.
Xanadu transclusion is distinctive in that the point is you can see side by side the original and the instance.
Yep.
And now Wikipedia, for example, is now based entirely on transclusion, but you can't see the original directly. If you go to Wikipedia transclusion, you will find their mechanism, but you don't see it. You can go to the origin page or the result page, but not see them side by side.
Yeah, I didn't show that here, but you can see multiple versions of things side by side. Okay. All right. Thank you.